Like, subscribe, and turn on the bell for daily stories of true love and growth. Share with anyone who loves emotional romance. The cold wind of the Pacific Northwest whipped through the small fishing cove on the American coast. Ethan, with his backpack slung over his shoulder and his hair disheveled by the breeze, surveyed the landscape before him. He had arrived at this remote corner with a clear purpose: to study the marine ecosystem, one of the richest and, lately, one of the most threatened in the country. The small wooden houses lining the coast had a rustic air, some a bit weathered by time. The fishermen, focused on their daily tasks, barely noticed his presence. Ethan, with a mix of excitement and nervousness, headed to the dock, where a group of men were discussing the weather and the catch. "Looking for someone?" asked one of the fishermen, an elderly man with skin toughened by the sun. "I'm Ethan, the marine biologist who's here to study the local waters," he replied with a smile, trying to break the ice. The men's faces changed. Some exchanged uncomfortable glances, and others frowned. The presence of an outsider was not always welcome in such closed-off places. But Ethan was used to it. He knew that gaining the trust of the local people would take time. "And what do you hope to find here?" asked another man, younger, with a challenging gaze. Before Ethan could answer, a female voice spoke up from the pier. "You wouldn't find much if I were you," said a woman, as she loaded a fishing net onto her boat. She was tall and strong, with dark hair tied back in a braid. Her eyes watched him with a mix of curiosity and distrust. "Lena," whispered one of the fishermen, "always getting into everything." "I'm just here to do my job, to investigate what's happening in these waters," Ethan replied, addressing her. Lena set down the net and looked at him intently. "Investigate what? Everyone here knows what's happening, but we don't need a stranger to solve it." Ethan was surprised by the harshness of her words, but at the same time saw an opportunity. "If you know, then perhaps I can help you find a solution," he replied calmly. "I want to protect these waters too." Lena observed him in silence for a few seconds before returning to work. Ethan understood that gaining her trust wouldn't be easy, but he was determined to try. Over time, Ethan began to settle into the cove. He rented a small cabin near the sea, from where he could observe the fishermen's movements and begin his studies. Every morning, he went out early to the coast, collecting water samples and observing the marine fauna. However, despite his dedication, he couldn't help but feel the inquisitive gaze of the inhabitants, especially Lena, who always seemed to be nearby watching him. One day, as Ethan was taking notes near the dock, Lena approached him again. "So, found anything interesting?" she asked with an ironic smile. Ethan looked up and met her gaze seriously. "Something's not right. Toxin levels in the water are alarmingly high for an area like this. Something is polluting the ocean." Lena frowned. "We've noticed," she said quietly. "The fish aren't the same anymore, and it's getting harder and harder to catch them." Ethan nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. The problem wasn't just scientific, it was also a matter of survival for the people of the cove. "We need to work together on this," Ethan proposed. "If we can understand what's happening, maybe we can stop it before it's too late." Lena looked at him for a moment, as if evaluating his words. Finally, she sighed and nodded slightly. "All right, biologist, but you'd better not get in our way." The following days passed in a routine that Ethan was beginning to know well. He woke up early to take water samples, walked the coast observing the effects of the pollution, and took detailed notes. Although things seemed calm on the surface, something dark was happening at the bottom of the ocean. However, what caught his attention most were not just the alarming data he collected, but also the figure of Lena, who always appeared unexpectedly at key moments. One morning, as Ethan observed the empty and worn fishing nets, Lena approached him once more, this time with a less severe expression. "What have you found so far?" she asked, her voice reflecting more curiosity than distrust. "Toxin levels have increased. It's as if something is dumping waste directly into the ocean," Ethan replied, pointing to the pages of his notebook full of notes and graphs. Lena looked at the papers, frowning. "We know something's not right, but no one has been able to prove where it's coming from. The fish have dwindled and the algae are dying. If it continues like this, we'll have nothing to fish in a couple of months." Ethan sighed, recognizing the urgency of the situation. He knew he couldn't do it alone, and that however much he tried, he would need the cooperation of Lena and the other fishermen. "I have a theory," Ethan said, looking up at her. "The source of this pollution might be coming from land, something big, like a nearby company or factory." Lena looked at him, her expression hardening. "There are rumors," she said, crossing her arms. Some fishermen believe a mining corporation operating inland might be behind this. They've been drilling and excavating near the river that flows into the sea, but we have no proof. Ethan felt a pang of hope. If they could connect the pollution to that company, they might have a chance to save the ocean and the community. However, he knew that confronting such a powerful corporation would not be easy. The resistance they would encounter could be brutal. We need proof, Ethan replied with determination. If we can prove they're behind this, we could stop them. Lena looked him in the eyes, evaluating his conviction. Finally, she nodded. I know someone who can help us. He's a friend of mine, works at the mine. Maybe he can get information from inside. Ethan was surprised by the revelation, but at the same time felt a new sense of hope. They were closer to the truth, but also closer to danger. Later that day, as the sun set on the horizon and the waves gently crashed against the shore, Ethan and Lena met in his cabin to discuss the next step. The sound of the sea filled the air, but both knew that what was coming would not be so peaceful. My friend Marcus has been working at the mine for years, Lena explained, sitting across from Ethan. He doesn't agree with everything they do, but he has a family to support. He can't afford to lose his job. Do you think he'll be willing to help us? Ethan asked, aware of what he was asking. Lena paused, thoughtful. If we can convince him that this will affect everyone, including his family, maybe he will. But it's risky. Ethan knew it. The deeper they delved into the matter, the more dangerous it became. However, there was no turning back. The fishermen depended on the ocean, and if they didn't act soon, everything they knew and loved would disappear under the polluted waters. Lena stood up, heading for the door. I'll talk to him tomorrow. You keep up with your research. If we find something concrete, we might have a chance. Ethan nodded, feeling a mix of anxiety and excitement. They were about to discover the truth behind the devastation plaguing the sea, but they also knew that confronting such a powerful corporation would not be an easy task. When Lena left, Ethan remained alone in the cabin, the sound of the sea echoing in his ears. He looked out the window at the dark, deep waters, feeling that although they had taken an important step, the road ahead would be long and full of challenges. But he was determined to fight, not only for the ocean, but also for the people who depended on it, and although he wouldn't admit it yet, for Lena. The next day, as Ethan reviewed the water samples in his improvised lab, the first rays of sun were just beginning to illuminate the coast. His thoughts still revolved around the conversation with Lena the night before. He knew the situation was becoming increasingly dangerous, but he was also determined to get to the bottom of the problem. The pollution was not only destroying the marine ecosystem, but it was also stifling the fishing community. When the sun was higher, Ethan decided to go out to the coast to observe the fishermen's nets. As he walked along the beach, he saw a group of men murmuring near the boats. The concern on their faces was palpable. The fishing day had been bad once again. Lena was not in sight, which made him think about the conversation she mentioned with her friend at the mine. Ethan hoped she could get useful information. Hours later, Ethan returned to his cabin. As he made himself some coffee to clear his head, he heard a soft knock at the door. Opening it, he found Lena. She had a tense expression, and Ethan noticed something different in her demeanor. Marcus is willing to help us, Lena said without preamble, but it's not going to be easy. The company has strict security measures. Any information we get will have to be handled very carefully. Ethan felt a wave of relief, though he knew this was just the beginning. What did he tell you? He asked cautiously. Lena closed the door behind her and sat across from him, her face illuminated only by the faint light coming through the window. Marcus mentioned they've been doing something unusual in the past few weeks. They're dumping chemical waste into the river that flows directly into the sea. They've built hidden pipes to prevent inspectors from noticing, but Marcus has seen the operations during his night shifts. Ethan clenched his fists, enraged by the blatant environmental violation. We need proof, he murmured. If we can get some solid evidence, we can expose what they're doing. Lena nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. Marcus is willing to take us tonight to show you the pipes. It won't be easy, but if we can photograph or record it, we'll have something to start with. Ethan knew this would be risky. The mine and the corporation running it wouldn't sit idly by if someone tried to expose their operations, but he also knew that this was their chance to protect the ocean and the fishing community. I'm going with you, Ethan said, his decision firm. Lena looked at him, nodding once more. We'll meet Marcus in a couple of hours. Get ready." The following hours were tense. Ethan couldn't focus on anything else but what was to come. He checked his equipment, including a small camera he had brought to document his research. As he prepared, his thoughts wandered to the uncertainty of the future. They were not only risking their lives, but also the stability of the entire community. As night fell, Ethan met Lena at the edge of the town. Together they walked in silence towards the outskirts, where Marcus was waiting for them. The atmosphere was charged with tension, and only the murmur of the sea broke the ominous silence. Marcus was a robust man, his face weathered by years of work in the mine. He greeted Lena with a firm handshake and then turned to Ethan with a calculating gaze. "We don't have much time," he said in a low voice. "Security rounds are unpredictable, but I think I can get you in without being seen." Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of the situation. They followed Marcus along a dark path, moving further and further away from the town. As they ventured into the mining area, Ethan could see how the operation's lights shone in the distance, like beacons in the darkness. It was strange to think how much destruction lay hidden behind those lights. After walking for what seemed like hours, Marcus led them to a hill from where they could see a small facility near the river. It was difficult to distinguish details in the darkness, but Marcus pointed to a series of pipes extending from the mine to the water. "Those are the pipes they use," he explained quietly. "They're dumping the chemicals through there. They don't always do it, but if we're lucky, we'll see something tonight." Ethan prepared his camera, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew they couldn't fail. As they waited in silence, a truck approached the facility and the lights began to turn on. The shadows of workers moving back and forth indicated that something was about to happen. Ethan held his breath as he pointed the camera at the pipes. The tension in the air was palpable, and as the minutes passed, the gravity of what they were doing became more real. This could be the first step to saving the ocean, but it also meant they were entering dangerous territory. Ethan gritted his teeth as he watched the dark liquid flowing from the pipes. The truck that had just arrived brought more barrels, which the workers expertly emptied into the pipe mouths. The noise of the machines was deafening, but Ethan kept his focus on capturing everything with his camera. He knew that what they were witnessing was the irrefutable proof they needed. Beside him, Lena watched with narrowed eyes, her jaw clenched in rage. For her, every drop of that poison falling into the river meant the destruction of her home, of the life she had known since childhood. The fish were dying, the nets came back empty, and the future of the local fishermen became increasingly bleak. Marcus, a few meters away, cautiously watched the movements of the security guards. He knew the risk was enormous. If they were discovered, he wouldn't just lose his job, but they could retaliate against him and his family. But he was also aware that the situation had already gone too far. He had seen with his own eyes the damage these chemicals were causing, and he couldn't stay silent any longer. "We need to leave soon," Marcus whispered nervously, looking towards the distant camp lights. Ethan nodded, taking the last photos before turning off his camera. The captured images were clear, and the videos showed the complete process. They had what they needed, but escaping unseen was now the priority. "That's enough," Ethan said as he put the camera in his backpack. "Let's go." With careful steps, the trio began to retreat along the same path they had come. Adrenaline coursed through their veins, and every rustle of leaves under their feet reminded them of the precariousness of the situation. The camp light still shone in the distance, but the danger had not passed. Suddenly, a flashlight beam swept across a few meters from them. A security guard, alerted by a nearby noise, was approaching their direction. Lena held her breath while Marcus quickly signaled for them to duck behind a bush. The beam of light brushed past them, but the guard didn't see them. They waited in silence as the man slowly walked away. Ethan felt his heart start pounding again as the threat vanished. They knew they couldn't stay in that area much longer. When they finally reached a safe distance, Ethan exhaled deeply, releasing the accumulated tension. He turned to Marcus and Lena, grateful for their help, but knowing that this was just the beginning. "Now we have the evidence," Ethan said, his voice firm but cautious. "But we can't just go and publish it. The corporation has a lot of power, and they won't hesitate to try and silence this." Marcus nodded, aware of what was at stake. "I know some local journalists who can help," Lena said, "people who have covered similar cases and aren't afraid to confront the powerful." Ethan thought for a moment, evaluating the options. It wasn't just a matter of exposing the truth, but of protecting the people involved. He knew that the higher they went, the greater the risk. "All right," he finally replied. "We'll talk to them, but first, we need to make sure this information gets into the right hands." The journey back to the town was silent. Although the success of their mission gave them a respite, the danger had not disappeared. The faint moonlight guided them back, as the shadows of the trees seemed to lengthen around them, as if the forest shared the gravity of what they had discovered. When they arrived at Ethan's cabin, they decided it would be best to spend the night there to review the recordings and organize their next step. Marcus said goodbye with a grave expression, knowing that every move counted. "Be careful," he said before disappearing into the darkness. "We'll see each other tomorrow to discuss the next steps." Ethan and Lena entered the cabin. The atmosphere was heavy, and the night's fatigue began to set in. But before resting, Ethan connected the camera to his computer. Together, they reviewed the images and videos they had captured. "It's enough," Ethan murmured. "With this, they won't be able to deny it." Lena looked at him, and for a moment a faint smile of hope crossed her face. Although they knew the fight wasn't over, this small achievement was a step in the right direction. "Tomorrow we'll contact the journalists," she said. "If all goes well, this will be public before they can react." But deep down, both knew that the corporation wouldn't stand idly by. What they had achieved that night was just one piece in a much larger puzzle, and the interests at stake were immense. Ethan turned off the computer and sighed. "Let's rest," he finally said. "Tomorrow will be another long day." As the first lights of dawn began to peek through the window, Ethan and Lena succumbed to exhaustion, knowing that the next day they would have to face an enemy much more powerful than they imagined. The sound of the phone woke Ethan. It was still early, but the call was urgent. He got up quickly, while Lena stirred sleepily in the other room. Seeing the number on the screen, his heart quickened. It was Marcus. "What's going on?" Ethan asked, his voice still raspy with sleep. "They're looking for us," Marcus replied, his tone laden with concern. "Last night, after I left your cabin, I saw a couple of men in a car parked near my house. They were watching me, I'm sure. It's not safe for us to be seen together." Ethan felt a knot in his stomach. He knew that sooner or later the corporation would realize what they had done, but he didn't think it would be so quick. "You have to keep a low profile," Ethan said, trying to stay calm. "Don't do anything to draw attention. We're almost ready to contact the journalists. We just need a little more time." "I understand, but I don't know how much longer I can stay hidden," Marcus replied, his voice showing signs of distress. "If they find out I was the one who helped you, my family will be in danger." Ethan was silent for a moment. He knew Marcus was risking everything, and the gravity of the situation was beginning to weigh on him more than ever. They had the evidence, but exposing it could unleash a storm in their lives. "I know, Marcus, we're working as fast as possible," he finally said. "For now, stay home and keep a low profile. I'll take care of the rest." After hanging up, Ethan sat for a moment, letting the reality of the situation sink in. Lena appeared at the door, worried. "What happened?" she asked, noticing the tense expression on his face. "They're watching Marcus," Ethan replied. "This is going to be more complicated than we thought. We have to move fast before they find out what we did." Lena frowned, understanding the gravity of the situation. Not only were they putting Marcus at risk, but also their families, the entire community. "We have to contact the journalist today," she said with determination. "We can't wait any longer." Ethan nodded. He knew she was right. If they delayed, the corporation could get ahead, dispose of the evidence, or silence them before they could tell the truth. They spent the next few hours carefully organizing the material. Ethan reviewed every video, every photograph, making sure everything was in order. Lena, meanwhile, contacted a trusted local journalist, someone with a recognized track record of covering environmental issues and who wasn't afraid to confront the powerful. Finally, they agreed to meet at a discreet coffee shop in town. Ethan and Lena would arrive with the evidence, and the journalist would be responsible for disseminating the information safely. Everything had to be done quickly and accurately. When they left the cabin, the fresh morning air gave them a brief respite. However, the tension was palpable with every step they took. They knew things could go wrong at any moment. As they walked towards the town, Ethan couldn't help but look around, searching for any sign that they were being followed. "Do you think it will be enough?" Lena asked, breaking the silence. "I hope so," Ethan replied. "The evidence is compelling, but the corporation has many resources. They'll do everything they can to discredit us." Lena sighed, adjusting her backpack on her shoulder. She knew they were facing something much bigger than they had imagined, but she also knew that they couldn't stand idly by while the river and its people suffered the consequences. When they arrived at the coffee shop, the journalist was already there, sitting at a table in the back. He was a middle-aged man with graying hair and an expression that conveyed seriousness and confidence. His name was Daniel, and he had been covering stories of injustice and corruption for years. Despite the dangers, he had always managed to come out on top. "Thank you for coming," Daniel said as they sat down. "I know what you're doing isn't easy, but if it's as serious as you've told me, it's necessary for people to know." Ethan took out his camera and began to show him the images and videos. Daniel listened intently, taking notes and asking incisive questions. It was clear that he was impressed by the group's passion and dedication. "This is bigger than I thought," Daniel finally said. "If we publish this, the corporation is going to come after you with everything they've got, but it's also something they can't ignore. It will be a national scandal." "We know the risk," Lena replied, "but we can't stay silent. Our people are suffering and no one is doing anything." Daniel was silent for a moment, evaluating his options. "I'm going to publish this," he finally said, "but we have to be careful. I'm going to distribute the material to several agencies, so they can't stop it so easily. At the same time, you need to take precautions. It won't be safe for either of you in the coming weeks." Ethan and Lena nodded. They were prepared for the consequences, or so they thought. What they didn't know was how quickly the corporation would respond once the truth came to light. "Let's do it then," Ethan said, with renewed determination. "There's no turning back." Daniel stood up, shaking both their hands before leaving the coffee shop with the evidence in his hands. Ethan and Lena remained there for a few more minutes, aware that the calm surrounding them would not last long. The next morning, Ethan woke up with a knot in his stomach. He had slept little, restlessness keeping him awake. The meeting with Daniel had been a decisive step, but now the repercussions of their actions were beginning to be felt. As he drank his coffee, he felt the pressure increase in his chest. He realized that his life had changed overnight, and there was no turning back. Lena appeared in the kitchen, her face still sleepy, but with a determination that made her look stronger. "Are you okay?" she asked, noticing Ethan's tense expression. "I don't know," he replied. "I feel like this is moving too fast. What if the corporation finds out what we're doing before it's published?" "We'll have to be one step ahead of them," Lena said firmly. "We can't let them intimidate us." As they talked, his phone rang. It was Marcus, and seeing his name, Ethan felt a pang of worry. "Hello?" he said, trying to stay calm. "Ethan, there's something you need to know." Marcus's voice trembled, and that made Ethan's heart race. "Last night, after I left your cabin, someone tried to break into my house. I heard noises in the back. I hid, but now I'm afraid to go out." Ethan's face hardened. He knew the situation was escalating and that they were increasingly in danger. "You have to get out of there, Marcus. Someone has to help you. Can you go to a friend's house or a safe place?" "I can't," Marcus replied. "I'm too exposed, but I have information that could help you. I've overheard the men who were watching me, and it seems they know you're involved." Ethan felt his blood run cold. "How is that possible?" he asked. "Have they mentioned you?" "Not directly, but they've been talking about a couple who got into what they shouldn't have." Marcus paused. "I don't have much time. I'm not sure I'll make it out of this." "Stay where you are. Don't expose yourself further. I'm going to do something," Ethan said, determined. He hung up and turned to Lena, who was looking at him with concern. "Marcus is in danger. They have information about us, and I don't know how much time he has left." "We must notify Daniel," Lena said quickly. "He has contacts. Maybe he can help Marcus." Ethan nodded, though he knew their time was running out. They called Daniel, explaining the situation. "I'm going to make some calls," Daniel said, "but you two must be careful. If they know Marcus is involved, they could do something drastic. You need to get away from here." Daniel's voice resonated in their minds as they hung up. Ethan knew they had to act fast. They left the cabin and headed to Marcus's house, thinking about the safest way to get there unseen. The path seemed endless. Every sound around them put them on alert. When they finally arrived at Marcus's house, they noticed the lights were off. Ethan approached cautiously, knocking softly on the door. "Marcus, it's us," he whispered. After a few seconds that felt like hours, the door slowly opened. Marcus appeared, pale and visibly nervous. "What are you doing here?" he asked, looking around fearfully. "We came to help you," Lena replied. "You have to get out of here, and fast." Marcus looked at Ethan and then at Lena, unsure whether he should trust them. "I don't know if it's safe. There are people everywhere," Marcus said. "We know they're looking for you," Ethan said, determined. "And we know you have valuable information. We must protect each other." Marcus sighed, resigned. "All right, what's the plan?" Ethan thought quickly. They needed a safe place where they could stay until Daniel could help them leave town. "We could go to some friend's house on the hill. They have a safe place there, and they won't find us easily," Lena suggested. They agreed on the plan and set off, each with their heart pounding. They walked quickly and carefully, keeping an eye out for any suspicious movement. Adrenaline coursed through their veins, and every shadow seemed threatening. Once they arrived at the house on the hill, all three felt relieved. Lena's family received them with concern, but also with the understanding that they were in a serious situation. "You can stay here while everything is sorted out," Lena's father said, looking at Marcus seriously. "But you must be quiet. The family shouldn't find out about this." That night, the three friends gathered in a small room, sharing their fears and hopes. They knew the risk was high, but they also knew that the truth had to come to light. Ethan looked at his friends, feeling that together they were stronger. "We're not going to give up," Ethan declared. "The truth will come out, no matter the cost." In the dim light of the room, a sense of determination united the three. They knew their fight was just beginning and that the corporation's shadows loomed over them, but they also knew that together they could face it. The light of the new day streamed through the window of the small room where Ethan, Lena, and Marcus were sheltering. Despite the apparent tranquility, the atmosphere was charged with tension. The uncertainty about the future weighed on their chests, and each of them knew they had to act quickly. Ethan woke up first, his mind full of ideas and worries. He sat on the bed, mentally reviewing the next steps. When he saw that Lena was still asleep, he decided to go out for some fresh air. He needed clarity, a break from the confinement he felt. In the kitchen, Lena's father was preparing breakfast. Ethan joined him, grateful for the warmth emanating from the house. "How are you feeling?" the man asked, his gaze worried. "We're fine, just a little tired," Ethan replied, trying to sound optimistic. "But we need to resolve this soon. The corporation won't stop." Lena's father nodded, understanding. "Be careful, kids. Don't underestimate what they can do." Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of the warning. After a silent breakfast, he met with Lena and Marcus, who were getting ready to leave. "We need a plan," Ethan said, determined. "We can't stay here waiting. The information you have, Marcus, is key. We must find a way to make it public." Marcus nodded, but his expression was laden with doubt. "But how do we do it without putting ourselves in danger? They already know they're looking for me." Lena looked at Marcus, empathetically. "We know, but we can't give up. If we're going to do this, we need support, and that means contacting others, people who can help us spread the truth." Ethan thought for a moment, remembering a journalist he knew. Olivia had always been a human rights advocate and had covered stories about corporate injustices in the past. "I know someone who could help us," he said, determined. "Olivia could be our best option. If we can get her to hear our story, she could publish it and attract the necessary attention." "But where is she?" Marcus asked. "We can't take any more risks. She lives in the city, but we could find a way to contact her safely," Ethan replied, pausing to consider. "We need a place where we can talk to her without fear of being overheard." After discussing it, they decided it was best for Ethan to go to the city alone. Lena and Marcus would stay at her parents' house to stay safe. Although Ethan felt a little uneasy about going alone, he knew it was for the best. As evening fell, Ethan said goodbye to his friends and set off for the city. The road stretched before him, and every mile he advanced filled him with nerves and determination. He knew there was no turning back, and his mind spun with the words he needed to tell Olivia. Upon arriving in the city, he felt a little safer, but also more aware of the dangers lurking around every corner. He headed to the coffee shop where he used to meet Olivia, a place full of memories, laughter, and promises of a better future. When he entered, the familiarity of the place calmed him a bit, but his mind was focused on his mission. Through the window, he observed the customers looking for Olivia's figure. Not even 10 minutes passed before he saw her enter, her curly brown hair standing out in the crowd. "Ethan," she said, smiling at seeing him. "What a surprise to see you here." Ethan approached and greeted her with a hug. "Olivia, thanks for coming. I need to talk to you about something serious." Olivia's smile faded, replaced by an expression of concern. What's wrong? You look tense. Ethan led her to a more private corner of the coffee shop, and once seated, he explained the situation. There was something in Ethan's voice that unsettled her. I can't believe this is happening, Olivia said, listening intently. Corporations shouldn't have so much power. What do you need from me? We need you to get involved, Ethan said, looking her in the eyes. You have the influence and knowledge to help us make this public. Marcus has crucial information about the mining and the conditions under which the employees work. Olivia frowned, thoughtful. This is very risky, Ethan. Not just for you, but for me too. The last time I investigated this corporation, I received threats. I know, Ethan said. But this time it's different. We can't stay silent. Lives are at stake and the truth needs to come to light. Olivia nodded slowly, her determination beginning to form. All right, I want to help. But we need a plan. We can't go to the press without concrete evidence. If the corporation finds out, it could be a disaster. Ethan felt a glimmer of hope. Marcus has documents and testimonies that could work. If we manage to gather everything, you could write an article exposing the corruption. The conversation flowed, and together they began to outline a plan. Olivia committed to helping them, but warned them about the dangers involved. We must be cautious, she said. Information is powerful, and they won't hesitate to protect their interests. As they said goodbye, Ethan felt the first ray of light appear in the midst of the darkness. He knew the path would be long and dangerous, but they couldn't give up. The truth had to come to light, and they were determined to fight for it. Upon returning to Lena's parents' house, night had fallen. The three friends gathered in the same room, and Ethan shared everything he had talked about with Olivia. Hope rekindled in Marcus's and Lena's eyes. This could be our chance, Lena said, smiling. If we work together, we can do it. The group united with renewed determination, aware that the road ahead would not be easy, but feeling stronger facing it together. As the night progressed, they drew up their strategy, knowing that time was against them and that danger lurked around every corner. The next morning arrived with a sense of urgency. Ethan, Lena, and Marcus were at Lena's parents' house, ready to take the next step in their fight to expose the truth. As they ate breakfast, they shared their thoughts on how to proceed. We need to gather all possible evidence before contacting Olivia again, Ethan said, his gaze fixed on his friends. Every document, every testimony, everything is crucial. Lena nodded, her mind working quickly. We could contact some of the mine workers. Perhaps they have more information that could help us strengthen our case. It's risky, Marcus interjected. If the corporation finds out, they could retaliate against them. I don't want to put anyone in danger. I understand your concern, Lena replied. But if we do nothing, we're letting this situation continue. We must be brave. After a long debate, they decided that Lena and Marcus would be responsible for contacting some of the mine workers. Ethan would gather all the information he could about the corporation and its practices, as well as stay in touch with Olivia. The afternoon progressed, and as Marcus and Lena prepared to leave, Ethan sat in front of his computer. He began to research the corporation, looking for old articles, news reports, and any information that might be useful. Every new piece of information filled him with determination. Several hours passed, and when he felt satisfied with the collected material, he decided to check some contacts on his phone. He had a couple of colleagues at the university who might have information about the corporation's legal problems. He wasted no time and began sending messages. At that moment, Ethan's phone vibrated. It was a message from Olivia. Do you have more information? I need to know how to proceed. Ethan quickly explained what he had found and how they were preparing to gather testimonies. Olivia responded with enthusiasm, encouraging him to move forward and ensure the information was well documented. Meanwhile, Marcus and Lena headed to the mine. They walked in silence, aware of the risk they were taking. Upon arriving, they observed some of the workers who were gathered in a small group, discussing their daily lives at the mine. Lena took a deep breath and approached the group, while Marcus stayed back, nervous. Hi, we're friends of Ethan, Lena said, trying to sound casual. We'd like to talk to you about what's happening here. The workers looked at her with curiosity, but also with caution. One of them, a man in his 40s with scars on his hands, approached. Why would you want to talk about that? It's not safe. We know, Lena replied sincerely, but there are things that need to be revealed. The corporation is harming everyone here and we want to help. The man frowned, evaluating their intentions. After a few moments, he nodded, allowing the group to approach. Listen, We're tired of living in silence. They've threatened us and forced us to be quiet. But yes, we can talk." As they sat in a secluded corner, the workers began to share their stories. They talked about working conditions, accidents that had been covered up, and the pressures they faced not to report safety issues. Every testimony Lena and Marcus heard reinforced their determination. Marcus began recording on his phone, making sure to have evidence. With each account, the anguish and fear became more palpable. The workers were willing to take risks, but the fear of retaliation was still strong. "We can't go on like this," said one of the young men. "I can't let my family suffer because of this." As their conversation continued, Marcus and Lena took note of every detail. The afternoon was advancing, and the time pressure became increasingly evident. They had to go back home and prepare the information to share with Ethan and Olivia. At the end of the meeting, the workers thanked them for listening to their stories. Despite the uncertainty, they felt relieved to be able to speak. "Keep your heads down," said the scarred man, "and please be careful. We don't know what they'll do when they find out." Returning to Lena's parents' house, Marcus and Lena exchanged worried glances. They knew they had taken a great risk, but also that the information they had collected was invaluable. Upon arriving, they found Ethan reviewing some documents. When he told them about his day, his eyes lit up. "This is incredible," he exclaimed, looking at Marcus's notes. "With this, we'll be able to build a solid case." However, the tension was still present. Despite the progress, everyone was aware that they were playing with fire. The corporation had resources, and they were just a small, scared group. "We can't waste time," Ethan said, determined. "Tomorrow, Olivia will come to review the information we have and help draft the article. We need everything to be ready." The three friends began to work, sharing the testimonies and organizing the evidence. The night grew long, but there was no room for tiredness. They knew the fight was just beginning. When they finally retired to rest, each carried with them a mixture of hope and fear. The future was uncertain, but they were determined to face it together. The truth had to be revealed, and they were ready to fight for it. The next morning arrived with a mix of nerves and excitement. Ethan, Lena, and Marcus had woken up early, determined to prepare everything for Olivia's arrival. The tension in the air was palpable, and each of them knew that this day could be a turning point in their fight against the corporation. After a quick breakfast, they began to organize the collected testimonies and documents. Ethan sat in front of his computer, while Lena and Marcus reviewed the recordings they had made at the mine. The sunlight streamed through the window, but in their hearts there was a shadow of uncertainty. "I hope Olivia sees how important this is," Marcus said, looking around. "We can't let her stop at the first difficulty." Lena nodded, though her mind was full of doubts. "If we manage to get this out, it could help many, but we also need to be careful. The corporation will stop at nothing to protect its interests." Meanwhile, Ethan finished organizing the information and began to draft an outline for the article. He wanted everything to be clear and concise. Every word counted, and he knew they had to do their best to communicate the urgency of the situation. When Olivia arrived, the house was filled with a renewed energy. She brought with her an infectious enthusiasm, and instantly she got to work. "I've been thinking about how we can present this," she began, reviewing the material Ethan had prepared. "We need an approach that captures people's attention and at the same time highlights the importance of the story." As Olivia spoke, Marcus and Lena exchanged glances. Olivia's passion was contagious, and everyone felt more motivated to get their message out to the world. After several hours of discussion, they finally managed to structure the article. They would begin with a shocking description of the conditions in the mine, followed by direct testimonies from the workers. Olivia suggested including data about the corporation and its history of questionable practices. "It's important for people to understand the magnitude of the problem," Olivia said. "It's not just an isolated case, it's a pattern that repeats itself in many places." When they felt ready, they decided it would be time to contact some local media outlets. Ethan took charge of drafting an email to a journalist who had covered environmental issues in the past. He knew his story might interest her. After sending the email, the atmosphere in the room became tense. Everyone was aware that they had crossed a line, and that now the corporation could react in unexpected ways. "We can't stand idly by," Lena said. "We must prepare the workers for any repercussions that may come." "Totally agree," Marcus replied. "We need them to be informed and ready for whatever might happen." As the afternoon advanced, Olivia began to review the testimonies they had collected. Each one was a call to action, a window into the reality the workers faced day after day. "This is more than an article," Olivia said, looking at her friends. "It's an opportunity to change lives. We need to make sure the story is told correctly." With that idea in mind, they began to work together, editing and revising the article. It was an exhaustive process, but each of them was committed to making the story as powerful as possible. As night fell, a sense of accomplishment came over them. They had created something significant, something that could impact the community and open eyes to the reality they had been ignoring. But despite the euphoria, fear still lurked. "What will happen if the corporation finds out?" Marcus asked, his voice trembling slightly. "They could try to discredit us or even threaten us." "We know," Ethan replied, "but we also know that we can't give up. What we've done today is just the beginning." Lena looked at her friends, feeling a mix of gratitude and determination. They had come this far together, and they couldn't let fear stop them now. "Tomorrow, we're going to present this," Lena said. "No matter what comes next, we've done the right thing." That night, as they prepared to rest, the feeling of unity among them strengthened. They had shared fears, laughter, and dreams, and they knew they were in this together. The fight was far from over, but for the first time they felt they had a chance. With renewed hope, they retreated to their rooms, each lost in thought. At the end of the day, they knew they were about to face a great challenge, but they also understood that the truth must always be defended. The sun peeked shyly over the horizon when Ethan, Lena, and Marcus woke up, ready for the day that could change everything. A mixture of nerves and determination filled the atmosphere of the house. As they prepared to leave, they knew that the article they had written represented not only their efforts, but also the voice of those who had been silenced. They ate breakfast quickly, each immersed in their thoughts about what might happen. Olivia arrived punctually, with a smile that hid a hint of anxiety. The plan was clear. They were going to present the article to a couple of local journalists and a human rights organization that could help spread their message. "Ready to make history?" Olivia asked, trying to lighten the mood. "Ready," Lena replied, though her voice betrayed a slight tremor. The group headed to the city's press office, a bustling place where news was generated and shared. Upon arriving, they found a frenetic environment. Journalists ran back and forth discussing the latest stories they had to cover. Ethan stepped forward, approaching a journalist he had emailed. Her name was Sarah, and she had written about environmental and labor issues in the past. She received him with an intrigued look. "Hello, I'm Ethan. We have a story we think might interest you." Ethan and his friends took turns sharing the information, each contributing their part to the story. Sarah listened carefully, taking notes and asking incisive questions. It was evident that she was impressed by the group's passion and dedication. "This is shocking," Sarah finally said. "People need to know what's happening at the mine. I promise I'll review it, and if everything is in order, I'll take it to the newsroom." Ethan felt a weight lift from his shoulders. They had taken the first step, but there was still much to do. As Sarah went into the newsroom, the group felt anxious, each in their own way dealing with the fear of retaliation. They decided it was a good time to visit the human rights organization they had previously researched. It was a small group that advocated for workers in vulnerable situations. Upon arriving, they were greeted by an activist named David, who listened to their story carefully. "This is crucial," David said after they finished. "The situation at the mine is unacceptable, and we have to do something about it. Have you thought about organizing a protest?" The idea resonated in their hearts. A protest could be the perfect way to bring visibility to the problem and unite the community. With renewed motivation, they decided to collaborate with David to plan a demonstration. The following days were filled with preparations. They spent hours making posters, organizing the mine workers, and talking to other community groups. The energy was palpable. The community began to unite around a common cause. However, the shadow of the corporation remained present. The closer the protest date got, the more pressure they began to receive. Anonymous calls, subtle threats, and disparaging comments began to besiege them. Despite this, their determination did not waver. One night, while discussing the final details of the protest at Ethan's house, Lena expressed her concerns. "What if the corporation decides to act? I don't know if we're prepared for that." Ethan turned to her, his gaze firm. "If we don't do it now, we never will. People need to know the truth. and if that means facing our fears, then we must do it. The night before the protest, the group met to do a final run-through of their speech. Lena, who had been nervous for days, finally felt ready to share her voice. She had a passion for justice that drove her, and she was determined to be heard. The day of the protest arrived. The atmosphere was electric. There were flags, signs, and above all, a sense of unity among those present. The community had gathered in front of the mine, ready to raise their voices. When Lena took the microphone, her heart pounded, but determination replaced any fear. She began to speak, her words echoing in the air. Today we are here to demand justice. We are here for our voices to be heard. We are not just numbers, we are human beings and our lives matter. Lena's words resonated in the heart of every person present. The crowd began to cheer, and the energy transformed into a collective cry for justice. Meanwhile, Ethan and Olivia were responsible for recording the event, making sure every moment was captured. The atmosphere of struggle and hope was contagious. However, as the protest progressed, a group of corporate security men arrived. Their presence was menacing and the air became tense. Tensions began to escalate and Ethan felt a knot in his stomach. The confrontation was inevitable, but the group knew that their fight was for something bigger than themselves. With determination, they united as one voice, ready to face whatever came. The story they had begun to tell was far from over, but for the first time they felt in control of their destiny. With every shout and every firm step, they knew they were fighting for real change, and that their voice, though small, resonated with the strength of all who had been silenced. Thank you for watching Bloom Between Us. If you enjoyed this emotional love story, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for daily heartfelt romance and inspiring stories. Share with friends who believe in true love and second chances. Your support helps us keep bringing beautiful tales of connection and growth.